back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. I'm Taylor Dahl, and I said I was finished with my draft series. I'm adding one more, though, because this is a player that I personally really like when it comes to that edge position. He's probably my favorite edge in the draft, honestly, and that is Mike Green. So we're going to chat some Mike Green. We're joined today by Keith Morehouse. He's a sports director for WSAZ-TV in Huntington, West Virginia, obviously covering a lot of Marshall football. So we appreciate your time, Keith.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm super excited to get to this one. And I think that there's been a lot of people mocking Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M to the Bears at that 10 spot. I personally like Mike Green a lot more than Shamar Stewart. And that, numbers aside, just a lot of things on the football field that I like, that I think he can do, and I think would blend well with what the Bears do. So I do want to start with a little bit of the heavier stuff, because obviously some of the recent news that came out were the sexual assault allegations. Mike Green was very forthcoming with this. He came out on his own, talked about these things. He, denies both circumstances of it happening. But tell us a little bit about that, what you do know about that situation. Has anything else been talked about since he came out and spoke to media?
Not really, Taylor. That was, and in fact, when he got to Marshall, those allegations, accusations, whatever you want to call them, really didn't turn up, at least locally. Of course, when they go through the vetting for the combine and the teams get involved, some of those instances came out, and he went to the NFL combine, did not work out, as you know, but he did answer questions, and he answered forthright about what his situation was. He said he wasn't charged in either of the cases. When he came to Huntington, we talked to him, as a new guy, and he certainly made some plays in his first year, and then of course he blossomed this past year. But basically, met with the media almost every Tuesday. Marshall's media relations director, Grant Traylor, would ask him, and he'd show up. And all that we've seen of him in the instances where he's spoken to us, talked to us, his humility and, polite and on time. And my guess is the NFL teams that have vetted him and think so many teams think so highly of his ability. If there were some second thoughts, if you will, I think he would have dropped. So yeah. I think the teams have satisfied themselves, and the front offices have looked into these and feel like that's not an issue when they go on draft day here in a couple of days.
Yeah, and that's what the teams obviously will do, their due diligence of, asking those questions, looking around, because those are kind of, when you talk about the interview aspect of and bringing the culture to the team and stuff like that, that is important for a lot of teams. And it is Ryan Poles in Chicago. He's been very vocal about character, getting good character guys into the building. So that is something that I'm sure, if they have talked to Mike Green, I honestly am not sure that is something they probably talked about quite a bit, because I know too, I've read that part of the reason they said that because obviously he started his college career at Virginia, ended up transferring to Marshall, spent his next 2 years. He had a year off in between that too. He took a year, which I'm sure all of those things going on is a lot. It's a lot to kind of deal with. And so maybe that year, that break, just to get his mind right, ready back into football. But I was reading that they did say that that break and then the transfer was because of the allegations. So and he didn't talk about that when he got to Marshall. So what was the reasoning for him of making that transfer from Virginia to Marshall when he did make that change?
He explained it that he wanted a new start and thought he could be successful here, and kind of came in under the radar. Like we said, I mean, Marshall had several veterans on the defensive front his first year, so he wasn't a guy that stood out. And maybe that was his purpose, to come in and, just meld with the team and become his own guy. And like I said, it wasn't even, the coaches didn't speak of it. We didn't find it out till later. But again, I think that's something he wanted to put behind him and concentrate on football. And he has worked diligently to do that. So, we like I said, our dealings with him have been upfront, forthright. He's been a guy that addressed us after the pro day. In fact, we talked about, what it was about Marshall. He probably could have gone to the portal, how that works nowadays. And he unveiled his shirt, and he's got a big Marshall tattoo. So I really feel like he thinks that he got an opportunity here that maybe he wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah.
And sometimes a change of venue and a change of scenery is what does these athletes, it does them well when they need a new fresh start somewhere.
Yeah, Mike, when my Making Monsters podcast during this season, I highlight the Bears players that are on the roster, and I'll go and I'll talk to dads and brothers and high school coaches and kind of get their path into the NFL and how they got there. And it's always fun because everybody has a different story. And some of these guys, they start in JUCO and kind of have to work their way through that. Some are 5 stars and never have to worry about that side of things. And so I think the paths for people are important. And I give him a lot of credit for coming out on his own, speaking up about that, being honest with the media, answering questions, because that's definitely not an easy thing to do, especially in this time when everything hits the internet so fast, and people kind of run away with some stuff. So let's get to the football side of stuff, because Mike Green was so much fun to watch this last season. For people who maybe aren't as familiar, 17 sacks. I think he led college football with the most sacks. So that is definitely a number that pops out to me. But in addition to that, 23 tackles for loss. In 12 of 13 of his games this season, he had at least 1 tackle for loss in a game. And that's just kind of, he's a quarterback nightmare this last year. In addition to that, he also forced 3 fumbles. And so there's a guy, a former Bear by the name of Peanut Tillman, that we say the peanut punch. And so when you get those balls out and you're forcing those fumbles, Bears fans love that. But what did you see change the most? Obviously, playing time factored into that, comfortability of the defensive scheme, stuff like that. But what did you see change the most from his first year at Marshall to this last year?
Really, Taylor, just his aggressiveness. I mean, it from the get-go this past season, he was a force on the the defensive line. He, maybe that 3-4 situation would be perfect for him because he's a stand-up kind of guy. But he's got physical power too. I don't know if you've seen. I'm sure you've seen the clip in the Senior Bowl when he ran over the All-American tackle from Oregon, who's 6'5", 311, and that was, that drew oohs and ahs. And every game he would produce, and he's going to get double teamed a lot, obviously in college, and he did. Then there were the questions. Well, he played in the Sun Belt. What would he do against Power 5 competition? Well, he had a sack against Will Howard in Ohio State. He put on a spin move and then not only is the move to get free, but to be able to chase down the quarterback. A lot of these dual threat quarterbacks can run, but he's got the speed. He can change directions. He's got power. He does not mind going in and defending against the run. I think that's what impressed a lot of the NFL guys, is at 6'3" and 250, he's a little undersized for a defensive end, but man, he's got power. I mean, he will go at you and take on the double teams. And if he can't get to the quarterback, he can shift directions and come off the backside and maybe make a stop. He made so many different plays from so many different angles that he did really jump off the film at you. And it wasn't a surprise when we saw him do that week after week. It was a surprise that people really didn't know about it. But as the season unfolded, his name kept moving up the lists. And he's, like I said, he's been a phenomenal guy to cover. Coming to every Tuesday for the media session. Some players, rather not go every week, and to a fault. He was there and real humble. We asked him about the awards and the All-American honors, and it was always about him wanting to get better and to help his team out. And he did that unfailingly his senior year. I think he's as good a defensive player as Marshall's ever had on the defensive line. And Vinny Curry had a great career in the NFL with the Eagles. He was from Marshall, and they've had some great DNs over the years. But Mike Green, there's a reason why he's being talked about as a surefire first rounder.
Yeah, he was so much fun to watch. And I do want to tell, if people are watching this and you haven't watched the clip you're talking about from the Senior Bowl, I believe it was, he was just wrecking guys that whole. And those drills, you see the power of these players, and those offensive line, defensive line drills are really fun to watch. It's one of the biggest takeaways you get from that week. And so you're speaking on the size, and I know some people do have some concerns. The crazy part is when he was at Virginia, they said he was more like 215, played linebacker, jumped up to around 248 and was playing end at Marshall. So even that kind of bulking up his body and changing that position also shows, he has a little bit of versatility, I feel like, too, if you needed that from him.
Yeah, he's kind of a combo. If they want to use him and move him around the field, I think that's probably to his advantage and to the team's advantage, because he can come at you with his from the edge. He can he put his hand down. He's more of a stand-up guy. But I was looking at what Grant Traylor put out at his pro day at Marshall. He only did the 3-cone drill and the 20-yard shuttle because he had a hamstring concern, so they didn't want him to run the 40. But his 3-cone drill would have been number 1 among defensive ends at the combine, 6.85, and his 20-yard shuttle, 4.25, would have been number 2 among defensive ends. So his numbers and his analytics and then just his want to. I mean, when he sets his mind to go after the quarterback, he wins more often than not. If not, he'll just disrupt the play, and they've got to do something else and scramble to get out of it. But he's a phenomenally talented guy, and I feel like whomever he goes to, he'll make an impact. You know, you don't want him to have to go in there and be the guy right away, but he can make an impact, I think, in his first year wherever he winds up.
Which honestly could be an ideal situation. I think that most people, when you draft a first round player, you want to see them pretty much immediately on the team. But I think when it comes to the Bears, they made some moves in free agency to where he wouldn't have to be that guy all the time. They obviously Montez Sweat would be on one side, and then they went and got Adebayo Ajingbo on one side. So he kind of would probably be a rotational piece to start. But to your point, you have a guy for your future, a building block on that defensive line, which is very important. And you're talking about the quarterbacks, him being able to go against some of those dual threat quarterbacks. And if he was drafted by the Bears, he'd be at practice going against Caleb Williams every day at practice, which I guess would give him a little bit of extra help with that too. But one of the things I also read about him, and we talk a lot about this in Mason Graham having a wrestling background and how much that helps and the leverage in situations like that when you're talking about those defensive linemen. Well, Mike Green also has a wrestling background too. Is that something that you noticed when it just comes to when you talk about the leverage players have on that defensive line?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe why he's good at what he does, except when he just does it. Like, he's got the quickness and he's got the burst, and then he has that power to go. You know, a lot of sack guys are just he's just going to go get the quarterback. Well, he can peel off that and go get the guy coming, you know, on the other way, or he can track down the running back on the backside. That's, to me, that's what his gift is. He's got the ability to bull rush if he needs to, and somehow he's got an array of moves to get free. And obviously he's going to face some huge offensive tackles in the NFL, but his ability to change directions, you know, he's got a bunch of swim moves and, you know, thrust that he gets to the quarterback through. I just feel like he's got a good toolbox that and the athleticism to go with that. I think that's what makes him so dangerous as a defensive lineman.
Yeah, when you go through his draft profile, you hear words like all of these things in the positive column when it comes to Mike Green, and you hear them say explosive first step, deep pass rush moves, violent hands, relentless motor. Those are all things you want to hear when you're talking about that edge position or a defensive lineman, and that you, especially guys that you are hoping are going to be those getting to the quarterback guys. And so that's exactly what I think when you start checking off the boxes. And I know there's going to be some of the concerns with the size, but to me, if you turn on the film, it's hard to deny that he can kind of overpower some of those things even with his size. One of the slight concerns I have seen, and I'll ask you about this when it comes to the more setting the edge against the run, did you see issues in that area? Is that something that maybe needs to be developed a little bit more?
You know, I would think so, probably at the NFL level anyway. But, you know, it was funny. You didn't see a lot of people try to get outside going to his side. And maybe there's a reason for that, because his speed was such that even if he didn't sit the edge, he could still go make the play, which I think speaks to his ability to, you know, to get out quickly, and his quick first step, which works in the pass rush, also works in the run game. So I think a lot of, and I listened to Chris Sims yesterday talking about his ability to also defend against the run. And that was part of the impressive part, because like we say, a lot of these pass rushers just want to go, and they got one speed. He can deviate from that. And I think that's part of his appeal, is that he's got some versatility in his arsenal that he can use against the run and the pass.
All right, Keith. Now, before I let you go, I really appreciate this because I'm a big fan of Mike Green. I've been trying to push it more and more. Not that the Bears are listening to me, but we'll see. So when we're talking about that pick number 10 for the Chicago Bears, there's some names floating out there. There's multiple positions they could go. We're talking about tight end Tyler Warren. We're talking about a Michael Williams out of Georgia. We're talking about a Shamar Stewart. We're talking about if Ashton Denty gets there, maybe, who knows, players like that. But Mike Green, I think, is somebody who, to your point, maybe a little bit of a rotational piece, but can make impact pretty soon on the field. Do you think that a fit like Chicago, and I know you're probably not super familiar with the team, but just that history of the defensive players, the history of having those defensive linemen that have become just being such an important part of the Bears history, do you think that his personality, his playing style would mesh into that world?
You know, it's funny you say that, Taylor. And of course, I can't speak for Mike, but I just know that, while he was at Marshall, man, he really embraced the team and the program, and having a team like the Bears and a franchise like the Bears to be a defensive player. I mean, I think his eyes would open up wide. I've seen some different projections that have him maybe going 9 or 10, and now the Cowboys at 12. I've seen a lot on the Falcons.
Yeah.
So and a lot of how the GMs are. Sometimes they play close to the vest, and if they want to go get him, that might be the highest that he may go. So I think it'd be great. Darnell Wright, of course, Darnell. He's from Huntington. We covered him in high school, so they could talk about some Huntington things together should they decide to go that route. I just think he's a fabulous player and a real representative of the university. I think he'd do the same thing if the Bears were inclined to take him in the top 10.
Yeah, Darnell Wright, big fan. Obviously, they drafted him at 9th, so it would be very close draft picks also if he ends up going 10 to the Bears. But, Keith, I really appreciate it. I know it's a lot of the heavier side, but when you watch football and you turn on the film, I guess would you tell people to go watch that Ohio State game if they really wanted to see what he's real good at?
I would, yes. There's the one sack in there that I just think is telling on his speed and his ability to get free from offensive tackles. But you can find clips. There are clips where he forces fumbles. There are clips where he recovers fumbles. They're just you can find them pretty easily within the course of Marshall's season highlights, where it's almost like every play is a little bit different. There's not some theme that's overriding. Oh, that's what Mike does best. He just makes plays. He jumps out all over the field, and that's what opposing coaches would tell us when we were doing the games in the booth. They had to find a way to deal with him, but you can't double team him all the time because then you leave yourself exposed. But yeah, the Ohio State game, he made plays in the Virginia Tech game. Obviously, a great program there. So if you can find a few 2 minutes of clips of him, it's worthwhile to watch because he does so many different things so well.
I agree. Keith, someone's getting a very good football player, and I'm excited for him. I know the path, sometimes choosing that path is a little difficult, and I'm glad it ended up working out for him at Marshall, and I'm glad we're seeing a first round grade on him too, because it's really fun to kind of see those stories end up working out for these players. I appreciate your time, though, and happy draft week.
Hey, enjoy, and good luck to the Bears.
Thanks so much.